In this video, I want to create a function which will take a start date and an end date and then figure out how many workdays are there between the two. On the right side, I've shown the column that I want to be my output because here you have the first, which is a Monday, and then the fifth is a Friday. So there are 4 days between because I don't want to include the first day, the shipping date, but I do want to include the delivery date because that's the day you receive the package. In the second row, I have a Friday, meaning I want to exclude Saturday and Sunday and get 2, because again, I'm not including the starting day. And for the third row, I've added 2 fake holidays on the 14th and 15th, which I want to remove. In my original solution, I won't be including this as an option to remove holidays, but afterwards I'll show ImkeF or the BI accountant's solution, which is almost the same function, but she's added an optional argument where you can add holidays. And anytime you want to make a function, it's always a good idea to start out by making parameters, because then you can turn the query into an actual function, which makes things a lot easier. This should be date, and then I also need an end date, and actually give them values. I can then start out by creating a blank query, which I will then later convert into a function. That way the query and the function are related, and it's a lot easier to change the query instead of reading the whole function at once and writing it like you were inside the advanced editor. I first want to create a list which has all of the days between and including the first date and the last day. So I want to use curly brackets to say it's a list. And then the trouble is you can't do this with the date. So I first have to convert the date into a number, and then I can do a list. So I want to say number from to convert the start date into a number, and then using the double full stop operator in order to say I want to start from this and go to the second value, and in this case it will increment by 1, but otherwise it's still number from. And just for illustration purposes, if I didn't include this number from, I can show why it gets mad. It says you can't do this operation to add 1, but that's fine because I can just convert that back into a date. I'm going to be using this function for illustration purposes, so I want to turn it into a table, and then I can change the type here back into date, meaning all I've done is to go from 2 values into all of the values between and inclusive. Then I want to add a new column, which isn't necessary, but again for illustration purposes, I want to do it. Because I want to remove all of the weekends, I can say that first I want to find out what is the day of the week of the column 1, and then here it will start out with Mondays being 0 and Saturday being 5 and Sunday being 6. I can then add the filter to say that I want to exclude 5 and 6, and then it will give me this code, which is fine, or you can just say it should be equal to or less than 4, or say that it should be less than 5. Then I want to count the rows of the table. And then because I want to remove the starting day, I want to say this value minus 1. And I can add that as a comment. This is the general principle of the function: to take the start date and end date, create all of the values in between, and then remove any weekends. And optionally, you'd also want to remove holidays, which will be covered in a moment. But this is what I want to do, which means I can then convert it into a function because I'm using 2 parameters. Then when I turn it into a function, it knows that this is then a function with 2 required arguments, which I can then call like normal, like any other function, to say invoke it, where it already knows that it should be the shipping date, and then my end date is the delivery date. And this is what I wanted, because right now I haven't taken into account that I actually want to remove the 15th and 16th. Well, the 15th is already removed because that's a Sunday, but I wanted to remove the 16th because that's in my fake holidays table. But right now the function does what you expect it to, calculates the difference in days and removes weekends, and then it removes 1 as well. Then for ImkeF's function, I'll start out by copying the whole function, and then I want to go through it to show how she's made some differences. And you can also see the source here, where I got it from. Then I can go through all of these steps and copy them, just noting that these are then keywords that refer to the parameters, so I'll have to manually insert those. But I can just copy this and create a new query and go into the advanced editor. I don't think I copied the let. And then in my case here, I don't have anything called holidays, which is why it fails, because I've actually called it fake holidays instead. So if I say fake holidays and then the specific column is called holidays, I believe it is, and I can say that, and I'll go through this in a moment what this actually means. So she does the same thing to begin with, but where I say create a list going from the number version of the start date to the number version of the end date, she uses the List.Dates function, which then says, generate me a list which starts from this position, which is then a date, and then you want to add a number of new rows, which is then equal to take the end date as a number minus the start date as a number. I want you to add 1 day until you get this number of new rows. So if we just do this as a step, that would generate 15 because there are 15 days between these two if you ignore the starting date, because you already get that from the function. So it's saying in this case to add 15 new rows. And then it asks here, because the holidays list is an optional parameter, so it's saying that if you haven't added that optional holidays list, then the parameter will equal null, and then you shouldn't do anything, so just grab the previous step. Otherwise, use the list.difference function, which takes the previous list and then removes any rows it can find inside of the holidays list. So this is an exclusive join. Only include those values that are unique in the List.Dates step. Here she uses List.Select because you don't actually have to add a new column in order to do math on it. So it's still saying go into this list, and then it's doing the validation at the same point of doing the calculation, so to speak. So for each row, convert this value into the day of week, where she's saying to start on 1. So 1 is Monday and 7 is Sunday. Then saying if the current item inside of the list, if that day of week is less than 5. Yeah, so the function says that when you specify 1, it actually means that Monday is the first day of the week, but the function is index 0 based. So 0 is now Monday, which means that 5 and 6 are then Saturday and Sunday. But that's because she says here just 1, where you could also use day.monday instead, which also evaluates to 1. And then it's just a normal count, but list.count instead of table.count. And here I don't want to mess with her original function, so I won't add a new step saying to take this value and then minus 1. And then they should have a better name. Which means to call it, you just call it again like a custom function. And it should be that, call hers. And then it says that here holidays is an optional parameter. And I can choose a column, but I think in my experience this kind of breaks, but we'll see if it wants to work. And the shipping date is the start date and the end date is the delivery date. So we can see if it wants to be nice, and it is. So that's very nice. And then to show that this is optional, I can just remove that argument, which means it now values to null. And I need an extra parentheses. And then in this case, because I added those fake holidays, it has removed the 16th because I said that's a holiday. And if I don't provide that holidays list as an argument, then its output will be the same as my original function. So you should use her function because it allows that optional argument where you can remove holidays. And again, that is something I got from this answer she gave, which is found here. And the reason why I wanted to make my own version first and then I googled and saw that someone else has answered it is because in DAX we have this NetWorkdays function. And I wanted that in Power Query as well. So, yep,